For this cardigan, we're going to be working on 5 parts, which are 2 front panels, the back panel, and 2 sleeves, which we're going to be knitting in the round. For the back panel, I did a 54 by 46 cm with a 6 cm ribbing at the bottom. And for the front panels, I also added a ribbing for the collar. The top measures 15 and the bottom 16 cm. And to add the slope, I started decreasing 3 stitches when I reached 25 cm and then just knitted straight up until I reach another 20 cm. And lastly, for the sleeves, I knitted in stockinette until 42 cm before knitting in 1x1 rib for the cuffs. To taper the sleeve, I just knitted all my stitches together before knitting the cuffs. For the materials, I use 5 skeins of blue milk cotton yarn, 1 skein of chunky chenille yarn, and then 6mm circular needles, a darning needle, and lastly an 8mm crochet hook. Okay, so just a little background. This is my second cardigan project. I saw this cloud cardigan on Instagram and Pinterest by this shop called Miracle Handmade and Hey Yes. They actually cost around like $180 to $200, and I don't have the kind of money for a cardigan, so I thought like, hey, why don't I knit this myself? And after a couple of Turkish tutorial knitting videos here on YouTube, plus I also saw a free pattern online for a simple cardigan, I realized that hey, maybe I can make this one. And yeah, this one turned out to be really simple and very beginner friendly. I think I finished this maybe in just a week, if minus the breaks that I took, and also realized that this is much faster than doing the patchwork cardigan that I did the first time. Here I'm just doing the ribbing for both the left and right front panels. I wasn't able to record the one where I was doing this stockinette stitch for this one, but yeah, this is how it looks like when the front panels and the back panel is attached. I just placed 2 stitch markers on both sides after measuring 15 cm on both sides and leaving space in the middle. This is how it looks like close up. The front panels are really slim because we're still gonna do a ribbing later, and I did this stitching method to put the front and back panel together. I actually don't know what this stitching method is called. I'm gonna link a video down below, but it's in Turkish. You'll understand it anyway. But yeah, it's in Turkish. I cannot find any English videos with this stitching method. I don't even know what it's called. I don't even know if it has a name. But basically, you'll need an extra needle for this one, and you're gonna knit the panels together using the wrong side. So first is you push your needle through the 2 stitches below. Here I'm currently already binding off some of them. You push your needle through the 2 stitches below, and then you knit them together, and then after that you bind them off. Then you just continue doing that until all the stitches are binded off. You can also use the Kitchener stitch with a darning needle, or like the classic mattress stitch where you bind on the right side of your work. And you can see I did something wrong with the decrease for the front panels, and it kind of looks wonky, but yeah, it's not so obvious from afar, and I didn't bother to unravel it. But yeah, anyway, for the sleeves, you're just gonna pick up the stitches around your armhole after you stitch the front and back panels on the side. So what you do is you just look for holes between your stitches and then you pick them up from there. It's up to you how many stitches you want to pick up. For me, I think this is a total of 53 stitches, and the size of the armhole is also totally up to you. For this one, I think this is almost like twice the size of my arm. I think it's also a little bit more than that because I want the sleeves to look really big. Here I'm just knitting in the round using stockinette, and I just place a stitch marker to know where my first stitch is. Then I just continued knitting in stockinette until I reached 43 cm. After that, I started knitting together all of my stitches because I want to create this balloon tapered puffy look at the bottom before the cuffs. I'm just continuing to knit here until I reach 43 cm, and then after that I started knitting 2 stitches together to taper the sleeves because I want to create that balloon puffy look at the bottom. And for the cuffs, I made this a bit tighter than I wanted it to be, so I think it would be better if I just did knit 1 and knit 2 together alternately to make it looser rather than knitting together all the stitches. So yeah, those are just some mistakes I made. I was thinking of unraveling the whole sleeve at first, but I was already too far off and I just really want to finish the base cardigan so I can work on the clouds. And after you reach 8 cm using the 1x1 rib, you can already bind off. For the bind off for the cuffs, I did an Italian bind off. It's much cleaner than a regular cast off. I'm gonna link a clear video down below because it can be confusing. I was definitely very confused when I was doing this at first, and it took me a couple of tries to get it right. But basically you're just replicating the 1x1 rib but using a darning needle. The only downside with this one is it uses a lot of yarn, so I think you will have to allocate like 3 to 4 times of the circumference of your cuffs because it really uses a lot of yarn, but it's worth it because the stitch blends well with the 1x1 rib stitch, so it doesn't leave this noticeable cast off unlike the regular cast off where you just like knit all the stitches and then you cast them off. And yeah, it doesn't leave that kind of like hard line and it just blends in. Plus it's also much stretchier than a regular bind off. This can also be used for a lot like collars and armholes, like for example you're making a sweater vest, so this really comes handy. And if you want to look your casts off much cleaner, I really recommend this one. So this is how it looks like. It looks very neat. For the ribbing, I just pick up stitches all the way from the bottom of my front panels and the back panel. For this project too, I started doing continental knitting. I just found it easier, much easier on my hands since English knitting uses a lot of motion, and I don't want to overwork my right hand because I also draw a lot and I paint, so I needed something that wouldn't straight my right hand too much. Here's how the ribbing, the front ribbing looks like. Here's our finished cardigan. It's not perfect but still lovely. For the clouds, can I just say that making this was so therapeutic. I think I knitted a total of 10 or 11 clouds using that one skein of that super chunky chenille yarn. I'll link below the tutorial I watched for this because you can't really see what's happening here since the yarn is really thick. I did some of the clouds on a thinner yarn first. I tried it out, but I wasn't a fan of how it looked like. The stitches were just very obvious and you can see the loops, and I didn't really like that, so I decided to use a chunky yarn instead, and it turned out perfect, just the way I wanted it to be. And also, when you use a thicker yarn, it is much faster to make. And I like how you can barely see the stitches with chenille, so it makes it look very puffy and almost just like a big lump of cotton. So yeah, it doesn't even look like it's crocheted. I did different sizes for this one, which means that the number of chains, chains? I don't know the right crochet terms. The stitches that you do at the first part, I think it's chains. The number of chains I did at the start varies from 8 chains for the big ones, and I think around 3 or 4 chains for the smaller ones. This is also just my second attempt at crocheting, and it makes me realize how much faster it is than knitting. I also want to learn more about crocheting because I want to do other projects too, like hats, and I saw this very cute like crocheted flower bag thing on Instagram, and it looks so nice. And yeah, those kinds of projects, because I think they are more suited for crocheting more than knitting, so yeah, maybe I'll pick it up sometime. Here's how the clouds look like in the end. They're so cute. I really like how they turned out. After that, I place all my clouds first on the cardigan to see where they fit best. This helped me check the spacing between them. I also didn't put a lot on the sleeves to not make it heavier, so I just placed most of them at the back part. After that, I started sewing with a regular thread and a smaller needle. I accidentally sewed them on too tight at first, so it created this really ugly bulk and lump on the wrong side of the cardigan, so I had to repeat that. Just a note, don't sew them too tight. I was afraid at first that the cloud would like fall off when I wash it because they're kind of heavy and thick. But yeah, that's why I sewed them really tight at first. But after I washed it, it still turned out fine. And here I'm just sewing while watching Grey's Anatomy. I don't know, but for some reason I'm always watching Grey's whenever I'm doing my knitting projects. Just a little side note. Anyway, also something I realized here is the importance of making a gauge swatch. So yeah, because I was just too excited to get into making this cardigan, and I just based the number of stitches and my sizing from this old patch that I did from the first cardigan. But I should have made a swatch specifically for this one because my tension also has changed over time due to practice, and then I also changed my knitting style, so make a gauge swatch if you want really accurate sizing. And yeah, this is the finished cardigan. we're done. It looks very cute. And since I had 1.5 extra skein of yarn, I also made the bralette kind of crop top with the remaining one that I have. I just made a more breathable kind of top since I really can't find any use for that extra yarn. So this is easy. I think it just took me 3 hours to make this. I also knitted the whole thing in the round, which makes it much faster. So what I did here is I just made a 1x1 rib at the bottom, just like what I did with the cardigan, and knitted in stockinette. After reaching my desired length, I started the decrease stitches for the left and right side. You only need to know the knit two together and the SSK decrease for both sides to shape the neckline. Back is just straight. I didn't do any shape lining on it, and it turned out like this cute summer crop top. That's the whole project, and now let's do a fit check. Darling, you send me, I know you send me. So that's it for my $10 cardigan. I hope you guys like it, and if you have like any knitting project ideas, let me know, and see you in the next one.